morning and happy Friday to everyone. I'm pleased to call to order the March State Advisory Council on Education meeting. Before we proceed with the meeting, I would like to kindly remind everyone that we are being live on YouTube, and we warmly welcome our online listeners who are joining us and those that are in our audience. I would like to note that several of our SACE members are joining us via WebEx. At this time, I would like to do a roll call. Dr. Silver?
Yes, ma'am. At this time, we'll do a roll call vote. If you're present, please make sure you speak into your mic and indicate that you're here. And when you're online, please unmute and let us know that you're here. Jeremiah Moore.
Here.
Cammy O'Lanning. Amanda Frazard.
Present.
Calvin Locklear.
Here.
Tamara Carter.
Here.
Will Paul. Stephen Bell.
Here.
Stacy Lynch.
Here.
Angelique Jacobs.
Here.
Brandy Jacobs. Dorothy Stewart Yates.
Here.
Representative Edward Godwin. Representative Jared Lowry. Dr. LaRonda Lowry.
Present.
And Dr. Tiffany Locklear.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Dr. Silver. Our first item of business is our agenda for today. Can we get an approval for our agenda?
So move.
Do we have a second?
Kimmy Lanning, second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? So moved. I trust that,
Just as a reminder, when you make a motion, if you could state your name, because we'll go back and listen for a minute first.
thank you. I trust that everyone has had the opportunity to review our November minutes. So we need a motion to approve our November minutes.
Stacy Lynch make a motion to approve the November minutes.
Stephen Bell, I second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays or discussion? So moved. Thank you all. Just for an update, many of our SACE members attended the Unity Conference. There were some presentations from our SACE members. Thank you all for your contribution to the United Tribes of North Carolina Unity Conference and your participation in attending the conference. We got to get some time from around the table, so that's most appreciative. All right, we will begin with our agenda. Our first presenter today is Dr. Angie Mullenix. I hope I said that right. And she's going to be speaking on our state-level Indian Education Director position and providing an update for us. Welcome, Dr. Angie.
Thank you all for having me. I hate talking with my back turned to you, so just know I'm talking to you also. All right, thank you for having me here today. I'm going to share a little bit. If you can put the slides up. Okay. And then you're welcome to put that back up. factories. If you're familiar with Indiana, Northeast Indiana, it's very factory kind of environment. My parents are both from Kentucky, from Clay County in Harlan, Kentucky, and growing up, I knew I did not have any money for college, so I left. I graduated early at 17 and joined the Army, so I came down to Fort Bragg, which is now Fort Liberty, as a military police paratrooper, and that is what brought me here to North Carolina. I was really not interested in college. I wanted to be a police officer, but the Army kind of shifted that, and so I thought, you know, maybe I don't want to sit in a patrol car all day. Maybe I want to be an investigator, and for that I needed a college degree. So I went to UNC Pembroke and got a degree in English, not with the intention of being an educator. But as I was graduating, and I was through the first phase for the FBI, as I was graduating from UNC Pembroke, I happened to walk through the University Center, and there was a teacher job fair. And I needed a paycheck, and so I was kind of a little interested, but I really had no idea what I was, you know, interested in. And Hoke County Schools was hiring a teacher to start mid-year to teach high school English. And so I said, sure, if you tell me what I need to know and how to do that, I will gladly join your team. So I went as a lateral entry teacher to Hoke County Schools. I ended up staying there. I did not go into law enforcement after that. I ended up staying there for 3 years because I fell in love with it. Of course, I needed my license and certification, and so I went back to UNC Pembroke and got my Master of Arts in Teaching English Education. So I did my bachelor's and master's at UNCP, and then I shifted a little bit to higher education because I got married and had children, and that was a little more flexible, and spent some time in Texas in a large school district as a district administrator, and then came back here to North Carolina, where I was an educational researcher at the Friday Institute for a little bit before I came here to DPI. And I've been here at DPI for almost 5 years. It'll be 5 years in October. And I've done kind of a wide range of things since I've been here. A lot of those falling under innovation, so I'm lucky that I get to work with folks across the entire agency and have really good connections across the agency, but also across the state because of that work. My team consists of 2 folks on it right now. As you see, it is a very small but mighty team. The 2 folks that are on my team are Dr. Erica Shoulders-Royster, and she is the Career and College Ready Graduate Program Administrator. And so that is a program for, in partnership with our community college system, to provide remediation, high school remediation in English and math for our students so that they can go on to the community colleges in North Carolina remediation free. And so that is primarily her role. And then the other is our state military consultant, and that is Howard Lattimore. Erica came from Franklin Early College in Franklin County, and she is a resident of Vance County. And then Howard Lattimore came to us from Cumberland County Schools, and he is our state level military consultant. I also do military work with Howard, and it's kind of a joint process, but that is Howard's daily living and breathing. His role was also written into the budget 2 years ago, so that we could primarily have somebody similar to this position that would oversee military connected students. And so both of those roles were positions that I was responsible for since I came to the department, the work I was responsible for. And so General Assembly put funding in for those to be full-time positions, and they really deserve full-time positions. So I come to you saying that because I understand that there are certain subsets of students that desire and need a full-time role. And so in looking at our American Indian director, that will be a full-time role, and that will be their livelihood, as it should be, right? And so everything that they do will be focused on that. So they'll have a very strong presence both here at the agency, across the divisions at the agency and the offices at the agency, but then also across the state and ideally nationally in some conferences and things like that. I skipped a little tiny part of my background. I still live in the Sand Hills. I live in Moore County, and I commute to Raleigh. And my husband is active duty military for 2 more weeks, and then he retires after 27 years of service. So that's just a little bit about me. I just wanted to share that because I feel like it's really important that you know who this stranger is that's up here speaking to you. Go on. Now you want to probably get to the good stuff, right? Enough of Angie talking. All right, so this is, like I said, this is a work in progress. I believe in a shared vision and that it's an ongoing process based on the needs of our state and our students that we serve in our state. So here are just some things that we've been discussing that could really be areas of focus as we start to build out this role and what that looks like for he or she who fills this role. So we want to, of course, support all of the State Board of Education regions. We have 8 regions, as you know, with American Indian Education resources, webinars, office hours, a networking PLC, and so forth. Once I learned that this role would fall in my office, I started looking at some other states that have state-level positions like this. And I saw Montana offers, they have a whole team and they offer office hours, and the office hours are published on their website. They are ongoing weekly office hours, and you just click on that link and you can pop right into the office hours for their staff and participate. I think that's a great way to always be available and have some sort of time for teachers or administrators or organizations to pop in and ask you questions and for you to be available. Of course, you have email and things like that, but I loved the office hours that Montana offers. So some of these ideas have come from both internally with discussions and listening to people who are connected to American Indian students, but also looking at what other states are doing, right? And learning from other states, and that'll be a part of this also. We have very good relationships with other states. I was on a call with Utah about something else this week. We just have a lot of opportunities to collaborate with other states and learn what they're doing to support their kids, and to take those ideas and adopt them for our purposes and tweak them based on our purposes. So the next bullet is to consider developing a recognition program similar to the Purple Star Award. So when I first came to the agency, I did not oversee everything related to military connected students. At the time, we had Troops to Teachers funding, and Doug Taggart, some of you might know his name, he works at the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs now. He was our Troops to Teachers consultant, and so he oversaw a lot of the military work. But one program I was asked to start was the Purple Star Award, which is our Military Friendly Children Award Recognition Program. Now, that's an annual award recognition, and there's certain criteria to meet for that. So we can discuss the potential of something for our American Indian students. Again, that's a potential. That's not something that's set in stone, but a way to recognize them as students and the schools that are supporting those students. So that's a potential. The third bullet is to collaborate with the North Carolina American Indian, Native American organizations to ensure greater communication and collaboration. I think relationships can just serve wonders across our state for the work that we do to support our students. The more we know about what is happening, and the more we're talking to one another, the greater we can be for our kids. So I'd love to, and I think that's an ongoing. I mean, with the work that I've done in the last 4.5 years, I'm always like, oh goodness, how can we communicate better? How can we collaborate better, right? It's an ongoing thing. Consult with the American Indian tribal organizations across the state and hold an annual summit or conference. Could be in collaboration with the AIM conference that DPI hosts, and participate in the United Tribes Unity Conference and other relative national conferences across the country. We will have some funding in there for that opportunity to go and participate in those conferences, just as Dr. Erica Shoulders-Royster is on her way to Anaheim, California right now for a conference. Howard was just approved to go to a military child conference in DC in June. We want to make sure that we are hearing the voices from across our country, that we're not just, staying in isolation, so that we can make sure, again, I say this many times and I'll say it until I'm blue in the face, that we are supporting our students as best as we can, and that we all go to sleep at night knowing that we're doing that. The next one is serving as the voice and the key representative for American Indian students and their communities.
and inform other state leaders and organizations accordingly. So this position is going to have a strong presence, both in the agency, but also within other organizations in our state. There, you know, it's although you're part of a team, Howard and Erica would both tell you, a lot of the work they do are, you know, they're out in the field, they're out, you know, we create their plan, and I'm not hovering over them. They're adults, they're leaders, they're out and they're doing this work. And I think the same thing for this role, to be out there and to just be that presence out in the field, and to be that voice. And ideally, this will be a strong voice for our American Indian students. Most importantly, I would love to see the first 90 days kind of getting a needs assessment, like what does it look like in our school districts across the state for our American Indian students. We know where a majority of, based on the students who identify in Power School right now, we know where they're identifying as where they reside. But just as military-connected children, you could have American Indian children in any of our 115 LEAs across the state. And we need to make sure we know what that looks like, what supports are being provided for them, what their academic achievement looks like, and start making that plan so that we can really make those improvements. Especially, I think, thinking about Title VI and its intentions as we're out there in the field, and how that funding is used to support those kids. And of course, as I said, building relationships across the State Board of Education regions. Okay. And there's not much to update here yet on the timeline. We have the job description. If you want to, you can pull that up and I can just talk through the rest here. Thank you. So we've requested the position number, the funding is in place, and so we're just waiting for final word on Human Resources to get this posted publicly. Usually our postings stay out for about 10 days, and then like any traditional job at the agency, folks can apply, and then we'll do interviews, and usually first round, maybe second round. Sometimes there's a second round with director level positions. And then ideally, as soon as that is done, that person would begin as soon as he or she could. Because we know the clock is ticking. This funding was provided, and this position was written in the budget a while ago, and the clock is ticking that we need to get this filled. So there is a sense of urgency in making sure that we are doing this sooner than later, right? This is probably a position that would have been nice to have had years and years and years ago, right? So we know there's a sense of urgency in making sure that our kids, our American Indian kids, are getting the supports that they need academically, whole child, all of those wraparound supports. And so with that, I'm gonna be quiet, and I'll turn it back over to you, Dr. Locklear, if you want to do questions. Or just want me to listen, whatever y'all would like.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Donna Angie. So at this time, are there any questions from our SAC members?
I have one.
Yes, ma'am.
Knowing that this position was put in the legislature previously, what is the timeline on that budgeted money to be spent for this position?
So it's recurring funding. So if for some reason that position is not filled by the fiscal year, so July 1 for the next fiscal year, the funding just is in place again for that funding from this year goes into the salaries for DPI, and it's just available there. So it's not like the funding is going to go away. It's a recurring funding, so it will be there. Ideally, we can get this filled before that July 1. I mean, that would be my goal. Yeah. Good question. And I'm sorry, what was your name, ma'am? I'm trying to learn all of you. Dorothy. Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Jeremiah Moore, and I have two questions. So my first question is in terms of the hiring committee. So those that are going to be responsible for actually saying this is the right person for the job, would the SACE board actually have influence in that, or be allowed to be a part of that committee, so that we could help select who the best person for the job would be, or provide some recommendations, as we already have, to say, you know, this is what we're looking for, these are the needs in each of our communities, would we be allowed to have that voice?
Oh, yeah, I would love your voice. So if you want to collect you know, like, these are some qualities that we would like to see, if you'd like to collect that and send me a bulleted list or something like that, I think that's definitely helpful, because you know what the landscape looks like across our state. In terms of folks sitting on the hiring committee, the hiring committee has not been developed. Obviously, it will be me. It will probably be a member or two from my team, and probably one from other leaders across DPI, so that we're kind of branching out. But I do not know human resources rules. It would come down to the rules on if external people from DPI can sit on a hiring board, or if it needs to be DPI staff. So if it needs to be DPI staff, we have DPI staff who are working with SACE that could potentially sit on that. So I don't have the answer for you, but I will definitely go and ask human resources what that looks like for you.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
You're welcome.
And my second question,
Mhm.
So in terms of districts collaborating with this director,
Mhm.
like, what leverage or authority would this person have to be able to say, I don't want to say force a relationship, because you definitely want to build a relationship,
Mhm, mhm.
but if a district is like outwardly expressing, like, I'm not interested in that guidance, would there be some support from DPI to leverage that and say there has to be a partnership, so that they can, you know, say, these are my recommendations and this is how I can support your district?
So, building relationships is probably the best way to approach that, because DPI, we do not have the authority to go in and say, thou shall do this curriculum. We just don't have that authority. We have a lot of local control in our state. But I think that depends on, you know, then it goes into the realm of district and regional support and low-performing schools, right? If they're low-performing, then we have a little bit more leverage as to what we can say and cannot say. I think the answer is that it depends. It's let's say it's a high-performing school, and they don't want anything to do with this position, right? Then it becomes probably pretty complicated. Then you're relying on that relationship matter, right? If it's a low-performing school, there's probably already a DPI presence there, and that person could then, you know, be a part of that team that goes in and helps support that school with those the American Indian student population. I will say we've had a great amount of success with Purple Star and supporting our military connected students in our approach that we've taken with that, because Purple Star is not something that's legislated that schools need to apply for it. It's if you would like to show that you support military connected children, then you are welcome to apply. And the first year, we had a lot of schools who said, well, we don't have any military connected children. And so we thought, well, let's check the data. That's actually incorrect. Every school district across our state has military connected students. And so what we did is we took that data from Power School, and if you go on to our North Carolina Supports Military Connected Children, we put heat maps up through Tableau so that you can see the percentage and the number of students that are military connected across our state, so that districts couldn't say, we don't have any of those students in our district. So kind of a little like, let us show you that you do. And so if it's one, then it might deserve some attention, right? One child deserves the attention. 100 children, they deserve the attention. Doesn't matter the number as long as it's just one, right? And so we kind of took that approach to show them, like, give them the data to show them that. But then once Howard came on board, he does a really good job of working with the school level staff who are already military connected. So for example, Cumberland County Schools has 2 military liaisons, right? Those military liaisons in Cumberland County Schools are working with Scotland County Schools and Hope County schools. And, like they're working with surrounding school districts. They don't have to, but they realize the importance. And so we've built kind of this strong networking to support above and beyond what we're required to do. And so I think leveraging those people who are already out in the school districts also is going to be important. Find who those people are, further those relationships, and develop a plan for how, because sometimes it is difficult if somebody from DPI is coming in and they want to kind of like share their information. That could be intimidating to a school, and we understand that. And so leveraging those people who are already in the school districts, in the surrounding area that they have relationships with, and to try and work that way tends to be a little bit more of a better approach. And I'll say I know this is totally different. I'm not comparing apples to oranges, but with the Purple Star, we started in year 1 with 136 schools. And this year we're about to enter our next award ceremony in May, and we'll have about 400 schools. And so we've expanded it. Pretty much was primarily in the Fort Bragg, Camp Lejeune areas. We now have Western schools, which we did not have at all initially, right? There really was not much of an interest out there. And so we're expanding. And I think a big part of that is going out there, bringing the information to the people, not with a harsh, kind of approach, but we want to help you. We're all in this together, and let's see what we can do kind of approach.
Thank you.
Before I ask the questions, I just wanted to follow up on 2 points. First was, if we can't get someone external from SACE, we would like to firmly request from HR here at DPI to have a DPI, American Indian representative, on that search committee.
Okay.
And then the second thing that you discussed, Jeremiah asked a question about forcing districts, and there was some of that language. And with Title VI, we do know that is a federal program, and that money actually doesn't come here to DPI. But I would like to note that we have like Title VI and all that, and there are compliances with that that can be strictly enforced. So establishing a very strong relationship with federal programs and your program would be most beneficial, because we can begin to use that language to a greater extent than with just Title VI standalone.
Right. And I think that's the other good part of where this position is situated, because under the innovation team is also the Office of Learning, Recovery, and Acceleration, which is all of our ESSER funding. And the director of that office was previously the migrant services specialist in federal programs. So she has extensive federal programs background. But with the ESSER funding, and we work very closely together. That's Rachel Wright-Junio is the director of that office. We have the director of Research and Evaluation, Dr. Jenny Korn, on our team. We have the Office of Charter Schools on our team, so we have a close relationship with them. And then we have North Carolina Virtual Public Schools Director also on our team. So we're really hitting all of the areas. But with our OLR team, we are constantly with ESSER funding in partnership with federal programs. A lot of times when we have like our ARP summer convening, federal programs is with us. So definitely made a note, but that is definitely on top of mind as well, to make sure that we are having that close relationship and learning what federal programs has already done, speaking with them just to know the lay of the land for what they've already done for any of those compliance visits, if they do any of those, what that looks like, or what that looks like at the federal level. So we'll learn that information and make sure we have a close relationship.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. My name is Stephen Bell. I am one of our Title VI Indian Ed coordinators with Guilford County Schools. I appreciate you sharing and taking time to share about all that you've done to research the position and create this vision. I'm wondering about how you were talking about collaborating with state level leaders. What's your vision and thought about how this director can collaborate with different departments? You've sort of already touched on that. I'm also thinking about state cabinet or state board. Is there relationships that could be cultivated that way? What's your thoughts on that?
So first, let me talk about other states, and then I'll go back to our DPI leadership and our own, and I'll go back in-house to North Carolina. So there are several ways that we collaborate with other states. One is through our CCSSO membership, which is the Council of Chiefs State. It's all of the state chiefs. I don't know what it stands for. I mean, I do, but you would have to go back and get all of the CCSSO letters for it. But it's the Council of State Chiefs, right? So all of the state superintendents. But a part of that work is that they have sort of one-off groups that meet that it might be testing and accountability. And so Dr. Tammy Howard has a group that she meets with CCSSO and a forum that she can kind of access for her area. So one way is to reach out to CCSSO and ask them, do you already have an organization that brings American Indian representatives together? If not, is that something you'd be willing to do? And see if sometimes they're willing to put that together for states if there's enough interest, and then it becomes sort of this PLC of state leaders. There's also a few other organizations that we work with who do the same thing. We say, hey, we're interested in learning more about competency-based education from other states. Do you have any other state leaders that you work with that you could bring together? And they've done that. That's how I got connected to Utah. So there are various ways. There's not like a one size fits all on how to connect with those other state leaders. It could be that you just go on to their website, find who their state leader is, and email them and say, I am, this person at DPI. I see you do this. I'd love to know more. Can we get on a Teams call? I've developed kind of networks like that with one of the other things I oversee is our Promising Practices Clearinghouse. So I'm in a network with Utah and Michigan on that, right? They're state leaders who are doing that work. And so we can help, lots of people across the agency know people at state departments, but then also, from my experience, other state leaders are interested in collaborating with other state leaders to learn what we're doing here and to help each other out. And so it kind of just depends on how you want to approach it and if there's something already out there for the state. As far as interacting with DPI leadership, of course, we're very close to the superintendent, and so we will. Anything that director does is going to probably be pretty visible, right? Because we want to keep the superintendent and leadership informed as to what that position is doing and what that looks like. And I know you have the report as well. Sharing that report to the State Board of Education. There are lots of things that we can do that may not be required. There might be some promising practices with our American Indian students that we want to spotlight. And then we talk to the director of the State Board and see if we can bring those to the State Board to share in one of the presentations. But interacting with the State Board of Education members on a daily, regular basis doesn't typically happen with DPI staff. That's, the state superintendent would, manages that relationship with the State Board.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Camille Lanning Dalgado. I am the parent representative for the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, and I want to say that the talks for this position have been in the works for many years, at least 9 years that I've been a part of SACE. So I just wanted to say I appreciate your due diligence and collaborating with us, making this happen. And reading over the job description, I know that there's more that can be improved, but I appreciate the work that you and your team have done into making sure that you're meeting the needs of the American Indian students in North Carolina with networking with outside entities and stuff like that to bring the best for our kids. So, Shki.
Thank you. And we are a little limited because it's we have to follow guidelines on what the job description will entail. But again, just similar to, kind of whatever you want to share with me, I certainly welcome. So if you say, these are some things that, if you could ask it in an interview, these are some things that, now if we have a SACE representative that is allowed to be on there for human resources and leadership's approval, then that kind of helps to fill that. But if not, you know, whatever you feel like would be more advantageous for us to know going into this hiring process once we get into the interviews. I certainly welcome that input, for sure. What matters to you is what's going to matter to us, but I just need you to share that with me so that I know that.
So in our SACE report, we did include some recommendations,
Yep,
and
I
some
saw
of those
those.
recommendations are really centered around this position. One being to participate and attend senior leadership meetings with DPI. And there's another one that I wanted to speak about. I can't remember what it was. I have so many notes here. And so another thing that we do is we do a biannual summit. And I noticed in your presentation,
The summit and the conference, yep.
yes,
Yep.
so our attendance is really good at that biannual
Perfect.
summit. And so maybe that the director actually assisting with that so that it doesn't get lost rather than creating a whole nother entity.
Yeah.
Would be a suggestion.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Yeah. And I saw that, and I love what has been done with the summit. It seems like that's been going on for at least since 2015 that I could go back and see. So I love what's been done with that, and I love that idea. I just wasn't familiar with how the funding and the organization. I didn't want to volunteer that to be an imposed, but I like that you have suggested that collaboration.
Dr. Angie, you had mentioned you'd love like a list of qualities for the position or even questions to ask. Is there like a date that you would need that by?
Since I'm not sure on the timeline, I'd say if so it's kind of stays top of mind, if y'all could get that to me by next Friday. Is it a week? Does that work? And you can just put it on a Google Doc and share it to me. That works. Or if you want to email, that's fine too, however you want to do it.
I just also want to note that this position did previously exist in DPI. So this position was here. There was someone working to advocate and close the achievement gap for American Indian students, and referencing that would be great. I did hear like a lot of alignment to the Purple Star Award and the military. And so just separating that and really using tribal consultation and meaningful collaboration as a guide to the work that we're doing here at DPI would be most beneficial.
Yeah, there will be no connection to, so Erica's role and Howard's role are very split roles. Even though they serve on the same team, they're very split roles. We have team check-ins, and this is going to be the same way. This is going to be I think we'll take some lessons learned from both of their roles and what they've, seen and done and created that has worked well. But these are all of a very unique team because they're all different work streams, whereas many teams, they're all sailing in that same direction, and we are for the purposes of children, but have very different work streams, and that'll be the same way. So hopefully there was no confusion with that. There's no connection between Howard's role and whomever fills this role other than that they serve on the same team and they're going to collaborate and learn from each other and maybe make connections. If one of our team members or somebody from the other innovation team knows somebody in a school district that person wants to get to know, do an e-introduction or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Can you tell me the years of when and what the title of that position was?
The title was American Indian Director.
Okay.
I can answer that. So the last time there was a formal American Indian Director was 1978. And I remember that because the year I was born.
Maybe that's why I can't find anything on that.
Priscilla Maynor was assistant
Okay.
superintendent, I think is what they call it back then, under Mike Ward.
Okay.
Superintendent Mike Ward, so she fielded a lot of that type of work at
Okay, I don't know her, but I know her name. Okay, thank you. Well, I'm not sure what records exist in HR for that, but if there are some, I will try to get them. There may be some papers somewhere.
You can proceed.
Amanda Forsard. Thank you, Dr. Mullenix. I hope I said that
Yes,
correctly.
ma'am.
I really appreciated seeing everything that you have laid out, and most importantly, hearing kind of your backstory that you do have a connection being at a Native American institution. And most importantly, that you would really have a set goal to have this listed by April 1st and committed to hopefully hiring someone within this, year for the General Assembly. Going back to Dr. Locklear's point, though, about the 3 directors that previously existed, they were all Native Americans. Is that something that you're committed to putting to in the job description, that they will be a Native American? Just specifically since they're working with Native American people across the state.
I
They
don't
would-
know that legally we can put that in a job description. I don't think that that's, I think that could fall under discrimination, so I don't know. Again, I'm happy to bring that question to Human Resources and ask them because they're the experts with that. But with that being said, we definitely understand the importance of, no matter what the demographic of the individual is, of that person knowing and understanding and having a passion for American Indian students and their communities. I understand your perspective on that.
And I understand the legality of it too,
Yeah.
but just was wondering if that would be a possibility.
Sure.
Are there any other questions? Thank you, Donna Angie, for your time today. Thank you for your support, and we look forward to continuing our collaboration with you.
Thank
Thank
you all.
you.
Thank you so much for having me. And the last thing I just want to leave you with is that I do know you can go to sleep at night knowing I know this position is very important to you. I know that, and I'm holding that close to my heart for you, that we will keep that with us as we go through this hiring process, okay?
All right,
All
thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is Title VI updates. Our very own Ms. Consuelo Richardson joins us.
Good morning, everyone. As she said, my name is Consuelo Richardson. I'm an instructional review coach here at the agency. I'm presenting the Title VI updates in the absence of our partners with Office of Indian Education who were unable to join us for this gathering of the North Carolina State Advisory Board on Indian Education. So I just wanted to provide a disclaimer that the majority of the information that I am presenting is information that I have retrieved from their Communities of Practice page that is specifically for Title VI programs to utilize and leverage to help guide their program implementation. So the Easy Part 1 portion of the Title VI formula grant closed on March 8th. So hopefully all of you who are Title VI coordinators were able to get that count in. And for those who are unfamiliar with the terminology, the Title VI formula grant is broken into 3 parts, and it's completed within an eden.ed.gov system. And applicants who have established themselves as an entity through the Office of Indian Education within the U.S. Department of Education are provided their own personalized login information to be able to access that platform and submit their specific LEA information. And so Easy Part 1 is where you would submit your student count. And that count is based on your submitted 506 forms. So that's how they kind of gauge how much money that you receive. Part 2 of that application is where you would actually complete the grant itself. It is the full application for your objectives and assurances as well as your budget. And then Part 3 of the EASY application is your annual performance report. So to apply for a formula grant under the Indian Education Program, a school or LEA must determine the number of Indian children enrolled. So that's one of the requirements for that, and the minimum allowed is only 10. So a lot of districts can easily apply for a formula grant with a minimum of 10 students that are enrolled in that LEA. For Indian tribes and Indian organizations, only more than half of the total number of Indian students counted must be from the applicant's Indian tribe. So as before, we have heard from them talking about Indian organizations and Indian tribes applying in lieu of an LEA. So they have some different parameters on their requirements for student counts. And then also, doing your part one, when you submit your total count, since it is a formula grant, that determines your grant allotment for the year. So when that amount is determined, applicants are then notified of when part two opens and then their total allotment. Next slide. So as you prepare, as schools and LEAs prepare for EASY Part 2, and I don't know what EASY stands for. I have looked for it for years to figure out what that stood for, and I have not found it yet in all my many years of Indian education. So if anybody knows what that stands for, I'd be happy to know. But Part 2 is where you actually would work on your grant. So Part 1 of that is to begin preparing for your public hearing. As a reminder, EASY Part 2, this application usually opens around April and closes in May sometime, so be on the lookout for that for the regions that you do serve, so that if there's anyone that you need to work with, an LEA that may not have a coordinator, just keeping them on track of those deadlines. And please schedule your required meetings accordingly. So also making plans to consult with the parent committee, which is a vital portion of submitting this grant. The third part is the federal program identification, to start identifying which federal formula grants your district already receives and how those are coordinated with your Title VI services. 4 is your program description. So you've gotten your allotment, you know how many students you're going to serve, you found out how much money you're going to have. Now you need to be thinking about the coordination of services to meet the needs of those American Indian children, including their language and cultural needs, with an explanation of your specific programs, activities, and assessments. The 5th part of this is to meaningfully engage with the Indian tribes located in the community to discuss the comprehensive program. And that's also going to tie into the meaningful collaboration and consultation. It's very important to have those people at the table to ensure that they are not the ones telling you about the students, but the LEA itself, that applicant, is telling you as a tribal community or as a parent on the parent committee how they're serving your children. 6th portion of this is to conduct your needs assessment. They have a community practice page where there's some FAQs on that portion to help schools and LEAs determine how they're going to conduct that needs assessment. And then the 7th part of this is to identify your objectives. So you don't want to not gauge the temperature of the people and population that you're going to serve. You want to have that needs assessments to then guide the identification of your objectives. And then 8, begin thinking about, you don't have to turn yet, thinking about how you're going to address that GEPA, Section 427, which is how you describe the steps that you're going to take as a grantee to ensure equitable access to and participation in the federally assisted program. So we also have to consider that, and that is a part of your Part 2. That has to be a well-articulated statement that they are heavily looking at now to ensure that there's equitable access to your programming. Next slide. So open consultation. All applications must be developed in open consultation, including through a public hearing. With parents of Indian children and teachers, representatives of Indian tribes and Indian lands located within 50 miles of any school that the agency will serve if such tribes have any children in those organizations. So open consultation is a process to gather public input from stakeholders on matters affecting them, and the process improves efficiency, transparency, and public involvement, raising an awareness of key issues. Because a lot of times their LEA might not be aware of the significant and unique needs of the tribal community. Next. You also want to ensure that you are sharing state assessment data. So anytime that you are in open forums with your Indian parent committee or the community that is served by the LEA and the Indian tribes whose children are being served by that LEA, you want to present that state assessment data. You want to pretty much be able to share, because it is an Indian education program, so it's not just about cultural activities and programs, but how are you serving these children academically? So you want to be able to present that information. I'm going really fast because I don't want to go over our time. A big portion of that is your Indian Parent Committee. All LEAs, including those in a consortium that receive Title VI Indian Education Formula Grants, are required to establish an Indian Parent Committee. Excuse me. The Indian Parent Committees compose bylaws to establish how that parent committee will operate within 6 months of the performance period. So say, for example, you're a new program and the LEA applied, but with guidance from the parent committee, but they're not fully established yet. They have those 6 months to be able to submit those bylaws to show that how they are, operating by those rules and guidance that they've set. The LEA applicant must develop its Title VI project and easy application with the participation of the Indian Parent Committee. The written approval is collected on the IPC approval form, and it must be obtained before they submit their easy Part 2. So your Indian Parent Committee membership will include parents, family members, and guardians of Indian children in the local education agency schools. Representatives of Indian tribes on Indian lands located within 50 miles of any school that the agency will serve, if such tribes have any children in that school. Teachers in the schools, and if appropriate, Indian students attending secondary schools of the agency. So keeping in mind that while this is a blanket statement that you will find on any resource or FAQ that they give you, here's some more guidance that they have provided, is that more than 1/2 or 51% or more of the total number of Indian Parent Committee members must consist of American Indian parents, family members, and guardians of eligible Indian students. The other 49% of the membership should be tribal representatives, a teacher and or student. School or LEA administrators and Title VI staff should not serve on the IPC. That is very crucial because we sometimes get wound up in roles and titles and who people are and the availability of people that we have. So we have to keep in mind that those individuals should not serve on that IPC. Individuals who have apparent conflicts of interest should not serve as a member on the Indian Parent Committee, and membership should be consistent with the bylaws. So create bylaws that are, usable, and sometimes you can manage yourself within that. Things to consider for your IPC membership. Who are considered family members? A lot of times we think it's only parents and guardians. Well, it's not. It is parents, guardians, grandparents, aunties and uncles, and other may be considered family members of an Indian student, which is something great for me to hear because I do have nieces and nephews that are in school districts and I would love to be on the parent committee. So now I'm going to use it as my leverage. Does every Indian Parent Committee need a tribal representative? So if there's a tribe within 50 miles of the grantee that has students in that project, then at least one tribal representative is recommended to serve on there. So keep in mind that that's recommended. I think depending on the size of your program and the amount, sometimes that recommendation versus requirement could change. Also, do you need a secondary student on your parent committee? So although it's not required, it is recommended that a high school student representative be added if secondary schools receive the Title VI funds. It also gives those students a good opportunity to serve in a leadership role, and then that person then becomes an Indian education coordinator one day, or they also become a parent committee member in the future. And every grantee should consider those alterations that are needed to accommodate the needs of that program. So in regards to roles and responsibilities of the Indian Parent Committee, your IPC meetings should be open to the public, announced in advance and in coordination with the LEA. There may be times to be for closed meetings, and those should be explained in the bylaws. The IPC approves the Title VI application. It approves the use of the funds in school-wide programs during the application phase only. So that's I'm stressing that because I have heard in my many years of being involved in Indian education that parent committees try to, after the fact, tell the LEA how to manage that budget and that implementation, and that's not their role. Their role is in the pre-application phase only. So they have input on budget items and implementation plans. That's what's put into that grant. So those changes that come after is not the IPC's role to decide. The IPC establishes and abides by their own reasonable bylaws and consults with the LEA on the development, implementation, and evaluation of the program. They consult and approve new items for consideration and decisions on their agenda, and then kind of help that coordinator manage the way they're doing things, depending on your meeting cycle. So roles and responsibilities or things to consider is what is the advisory role of the IPC? We'll review some additional things to consider regarding their roles. They do not set policies. The LEA's role is to set policy. The project director and the coordinator and parent committee abides by the statutes and policies for the local operation of the grant. So keep in mind that their role is to advise on the planning and implementation and evaluation of the program. So what activities constitute program services and events? Because that's the part that you're going to do in that easy part 2 is you're going to come up with your programs and services. So they are academic reading and math remediation. And how would you know that if you didn't do a needs assessment? That's why the needs assessment is important, to know where your students are performing academically and whether or not that Title VI program needs to provide that remediation service. Cultural and American Indian language instruction and enrichment. Health and wellness, increased school attendance and graduation. How would you know that if you haven't pulled any data? The LEA hasn't provided that for you, so that's why that collaboration is super important. College enrollment and counseling constitute as the main objectives, which may have coordinated or associated program activities, services, and assessments. And most activities, events, services, and experience need to be tested to demonstrate the results for your APR. So keeping in mind that program implementation also has to be reported on at the end of the year. How many students did you impact? What was the impact of the impact? What was the impact of their participation? Did they learn anything? Did we give a pre and post test? So these are some measurable things that are now required for you to report on in your APR or your EZ Part 3. Let's see. Okay, that's enough for that one. The Indian Parent Committee may not do the following. They may not set policies for the LEA. They may not hire, fire, or supervise the LEA or project staff. They may not directly administer and implement the project. They may not review personnel records or student ED 506 form without parental and entity leadership consent. They may not commit or obligate funds for the LEA or approve or disapprove the use of funds post-award. So, for those of you who are parts of parent committees or Indian education programs, you're in a meeting, you're trying to figure out how to navigate the conversation, these are some things that you can pull that are from the Office of Indian Education to help you, the LEA, the program coordinator, and the IPC better serve that program. The next slide I won't go through because it just really details those pre- and post-award roles for each, the IPC and the LEA and grantee. And that's just a resource for you to reference. And then, so the IPC approval form. So there are some changes to that. So if you are supporting an Indian education program, there are some changes to how the Indian Parent Committee information is captured in the Eden profile. So part 1 of that is just where you put your LEA number, where the program is from, and then your reward numbers. Part 2 of that is your membership list. So the directions for that is that the IPC must consist of more than half, we already talked about that, 51% of parents and family members of eligible Indian children in the LEA. A minimum of 3 of those IPC members, inclusive of the chairperson, goes into column A, which means that must be your family column. And then tribal officials in column B. And this person must have a formal delegation from the tribe. So I, as a Holowass opponent, can't just go jump into Ms. Lynch's Indian Education Indian Parent Committee meeting and say, hey, I'm representing the tribe, and the tribe did not personally delegate me in that capacity. So it has to be an official delegate, typically by your tribal leadership. Columns B through D are recommended, which is your tribal representative and your secondary students. So those are recommended but not required. The third section of your IPC approval form is your bylaws. So now they are asking that you have submitted your bylaws within that platform. If you don't do that, I think after part 1, then you'll have to submit it in part 2, I think. And then they might come back and ask, OIE might come back and ask a specific program, the authorized representative to submit those separately. New this year is, well, according to me, is new to me this year, is that now they are asking that your IPC meeting minutes are now uploaded. So if you're working with a parent committee, ensure that when they have their meetings, they are specifically planning for that next round of your grant, that your meetings are captured very accurately. They're very specific things. Those meetings should include the date, location, time, the attendees present, the members voting, the vote results, and the name of the recorder. This is important because you have to capture that parental input into the program objectives, how you've identified the areas of need, and also how you are supporting the LEA in allocating those specific budget items. Keeping in mind that pre-award, the IPC has a role in that conversation. Post-award, they do not. And then, of course, we're always going to go to the meaningful collaboration with tribes and the open consultation and how they intersect with your Indian Parent Committee. So this is a chart for you to share with your constituents and your regions. It has to be ongoing. So a lot of times in my experience, it's been the parent committee or the Indian Education Coordinator is presenting to the LEA, right? They're presenting their program. That is not what this is about. How is the LEA then coming back and presenting information to you specific to your population? How are we looking at data? How are we meeting the needs of our students in absence of your Indian education program? And then how can we coordinate and collaborate those services? So that concludes this portion of my presentation. There are some resources on here. I recommend that not only this board, but you share this with your tribal leaders, you share this with your Indian Parent Committee, that there is a open resource. It's called Easy Community Grads 360. It's a resource page for Indian education programs. It has all the FAQs. They do monthly webinars. They'll have webinars coming up for part 2 that goes through all the changes, how to navigate the systems. And these are all open. You don't have to have a login. You don't have to be a special entity, so that you can further educate yourself on the ins and outs of these Title VI programs to help you better guide and be in an advisory role for these programs. So that concludes. Any questions? Great.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez. Next on our agenda, we have our very own Ms. Dorothy Yates providing updates on behalf of the North Carolina Commission of Indian Affairs.
Good morning. I am Dorothy Yates. I serve on the Commission of Indian Affairs as the SAPONI representative. And our director, Greg Richardson, was unable to be with us today. So he has provided me with his report for the meeting today. On the March 7th commission meeting, the guest presenters included Sarah Welsh, an outreach specialist, public protection section from the North Carolina Department of Justice. She presented information regarding scams, fraud, internet safety, and how the services provided through the Department of Justice could be used for the commission. Reginald Spate, the USDA State Director, provided an update on the USDA program and the potential partnership with the North Carolina Commission of Indian Affairs and the tribes. Lance Gumbs, a citizen of the Shinnecock Indian Nation and member of the National Congress of American Indians Executive Committee, thanked the North Carolina tribes who sent representatives to the annual convention of the National Congress of American Indians in New Orleans last fall. And we had a good number of representatives from the commission and our tribes to attend that meeting. Mr. Richardson also gave the executive director's report, which included a continuation of budget requests, the state recognition funding. That state recognition is mandated that the commission do that work. And So therefore, the budget has to come through the General Assembly, but we still have to, request the amount and show the, amount that we have spent in that area. The Youth Leadership Program is being requested for $300,000 to support an American Indian Youth Leadership Initiative designed after the Commission's previous Educational Talent Search Program. And we've been, questioned how would this affect the, NAO? It will not. This is two separate entities. The program they're looking at is served through the high schools with, similar to what the old Talent Search Program did for our American Indian youth. We have 7 commission members who, whose terms will be expiring, and their tribes will be sending in their recommendations for these commission members before our annual meeting in September. We had one Indian Housing Authority member that the term was expiring, and the Housing Authority members have to give their recommendation to the commission to give to the General Assembly. We have 5 members of our State Advisory Council on Indian Education. These members were recommended by the tribes and organizations in the state, and the appointment recommendations will be referred to the State Board of Education, and those appointments were furnished. Our 4 members that will be serving, that are eligible, will be serving a second term on SACE. And then we have 1 new member coming aboard, who is the director of the Cumberland County Indian Education Program. The commission's representative on United Tribes was, the term was expiring, and it was voted to approve Mr. Greg Richardson to serve in that capacity, and Candace Larry, the deputy director, to serve as his alternate. All of the commission committees gave their reports during the meeting, and also during the Unity Conference, a session was given where each of the committees from the Commission of Indian Affairs could elaborate on their programs for further information for our American Indian tribes. The Legislative Committee presented legislative items to be presented in the 2024 session of the North Carolina General Assembly. State recognition funding, which was proposed by the Executive Director because that is a programming issue. The Youth Leadership Program was also proposed by the Executive Director to the Legislative Committee. Plans were discussed to hold an American Indian Legislative Day in the spring. Issues were discussed associated with the American Indian mascots. This item will be addressed with Representative Jared Lowry to determine if legislation can be introduced to bar schools from having American Indian mascots. So they are seeking his input on what or how to do with the mascots as a legislative issue, if they can even mandate schools for that. We discussed changes in legislation regarding the American Indian license plate. We have some state tribes that are wanting to have their own license plate. So we're concerned at the Education Committee of the Commission because our American Indian Fund Scholarship is funded by those American Indian license plates. So we know if people have a choice of whether to get the state license plate or their individual tribe, we may see a great reduction in the amount of state license plates that will be issued to our American Indians. So we're putting this out there just to know that we don't want our American Indian Fund Scholarship to fold because of lack of funds. So if you have any ideas, if you have any businesses that would like to do donations toward that American Indian Fund Scholarship, we're gonna have to supplement it anyway, because the number of the American Indian license plates are being reduced. So we already know that we have more applicants than we can fund for the American Indian Fund Scholarship for this year. And that is a $1,000 scholarship that you can apply for your 4 years of school. And it can be used for community colleges or for 4-year universities. So we have a great need in assisting our American Indian students with their higher education learning. So we want to think about that. Authorized a resolution of support for the federal recognition efforts of the Haliwa-Saponi and the Lumbee tribes. Authorized a resolution of support for the Waccamaw-Siouan Boys and Girls Club. And legislation was discussed that would authorize state appropriated funding for state recognized tribes and urban associations. We know that through ARPA, each of our state tribes and Indian organizations were granted funds, and that has been so helpful in our American Indian communities on what our tribes and organizations have been able to do. So we are asking the legislature to authorize more state appropriated funding for our state recognized tribes and urban associations. And Mr. Richardson had also put a note that at the commission we would like to know the status of the Indian education position that was appropriated by the North Carolina General Assembly at DPI. And we've received that update today that I'll be glad to pass on to him. The North Carolina Commission of Indian Affairs office facilities are at a new location. They are now at 325 North Salisbury Street here in Raleigh. So they are in the process of moving, and I think it will be April the 1st before they can actually use their offices, because they're still in the moving process. All right, any questions?
Is it possible that for the scholarship funds, that if the tribes do get their sills, that the money that the tribes would pay in for that sill license plate could be routed into the scholarship fund? Like, both the organization work with all the tribes to do that, so that you're not losing the amount of funding going into scholarships for the students?
That's a possibility. Of course, that's up to the state tribes. And a lot of the state tribes are wanting to use that fund themselves for their activities or things that they will be using it for. So even if they shared it with us, it would still be a reduction in funds. But we do want to think of some funding avenues that we can do. Right now, it is processed through the North Carolina Foundation, and they cannot accept monies and keep up with monies. So we would have to, if we have other people that are going to be supporting this, we're going to have to set up our own entity for these funds to go through. But, we do not want to see that scholarship fold for lack of funds. Thank you.
Ms. Dorothy, you mentioned Legislative Day. Is there a way that we could get some focus on Stacy and the education part, just as a spotlight for education and our students? Is there a way that Stacy can participate?
I will, add that on. I'm a member of the committee, so I will add that on in the planning stages to
Okay.
see what we can do. They have not set a date yet, for that, but they're setting that soon because it's gotta happen soon to have any, benefits with that. But I will include that.
Absolutely, thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Hey, Ms. Dorothy. Could you clarify again for us how, the recommendation for like a youth summit would be different from NICNAO? I'm not sure I completely understood. Can you talk about that point again?
Yes. The Educational Talent Search Program was a program where there were American Indian counselors visited the high schools that had American Indian students and would personally counsel them on what their plans were, when they finished with school and that kind of background. So, we don't have American Indian counselors in all of our high schools where we have American Indian students. And, this would help provide more guidance. And this is just in the planning stages, but, I know we had questions on, how that would overlap, where NICNAO is, a wonderful organization that brings students up, gives them a choice, helps them in leadership positions on making choices, and then the conference that they have, is really good for our American Indian students there. So it would be two separate entities, one not taken away from the other.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dorothy. We always appreciate your commitment to Indian education in North Carolina. Next on our agenda, we have the reading the North Carolina Arts Education Standards feedback. Previously, science was in that. Dr. Bonita Tipton reached out to Stacy, and Stacy was really active in providing feedback, and there were revisions. So hopefully she'll be joining us in our next Stacy meeting to discuss those revisions. So we received an email back in February. We can resend that if necessary, asking for our feedback as it relates to the art standards. There's a survey, and this focuses on dance, the arts. There's 4 different areas. So if you would please complete that survey or send that survey out to an art teacher, dance teacher, or whatever, so that we can have the American Indian community voice, that would be most appreciative. The deadline for completing that is March 31st. So providing our feedback, this is the second draft. So I would appreciate you guys sending it out, and we will resend that email so that it'll be at the top of your email. Any questions? All right, next on our agenda, we have an action item, our 2024 Stacy Report Review and Approval. Doctors Susan Silver, Kelly Briggs, and Ms. Consuela Richardson.
Good morning, Stacy Chairwoman Locklear, Stacy members, colleagues, and guests, and to all our Title VI coordinators who are listening online. Good morning to everyone. What we are asking for today is approval of the 2024 Stacy Report, which is set to go to the State Board next month. We are asking for that, that as you make a motion, it include approving the report with recommendations for revisions, because we are still in the revision phase. Want to say that as we set out. So I want to publicly apologize to Ms. Tamara, who's listening online, because her name did get left off the list of SACY members. That's why revisions are required constantly. So you have received that report and also another document so that you can note the recommended revisions. We are doing minor revisions at this point, and we'll send off those final revisions to our graphics department, because we don't make those. It goes back to graphics on Monday morning. So hopefully also during lunchtime, if you haven't had a chance because you've been busy with life, to look at it. We did make lunch an hour, so you have an opportunity to do some of those things then. But what we want to take a close look at this morning is the recommendation. As you all may recall, you had a work session where you came up with the big idea, and then we were to help refine that for you. So when you look at the SACE report, just a little bit about how that's put together. Once the data is approved by the state board, you have a presentation. If you recall, Mr. Curtis Sonneman came and presented the data to you all. And after that, there was a discussion about where there were some gaps at, discussion of your theme. You approved your theme at that time. And then later in the work session, approve the recommendations. So it starts with accountability, putting together all the numbers for us. They send it to our graphics department, who puts it in all those charts, and then they send it over to Dr. Briggs and Ms. Richardson and I, and we start working on the narrative. So we go through and say, here's the percentage point gaps between American Indian students, the state, and their other colleagues in their other peers in different subgroups. So those pieces are there. And then we keep appendices that are most relevant to your current work. For example, there was a pilot that SACY participated in that still remains relevant to the work and to hopefully the position that will be coming along, because out of that pilot came some very specific focus areas. So wanted to keep that in the appendices. Also in the appendices will be an update on American Indian mascots that exist in the state, and also we include some historical documents around mascots that were done in the days of Dr. Maynor when she was here, when SACY and the state board developed a joint resolution and sent memorandums out to districts, specifically to superintendents, regarding addressing American Indian mascots. So we keep those type of documents in there for historical purposes, along with just some basic information about Title VI and Every Student Succeeds Acts and kind of the history of American Indian education. So that's all in those appendices. Again, what we'll focus on right now is the recommendation. If you could go to that, Dr. Briggs. And you have that document there linked into your email. It's not in the agenda because, again, it's in draft form, so we don't want it in the public yet. So if you have a moment to look at that, and Dr. Locklear, I'll leave it up to you if you want to do a motion specifically on that, on the recommendation, or if you want to do it for the whole report. And if you'd like to run that at this time or run it after lunch, I will leave that at your discretion. As you are looking through the report, again, we're in that revision phase. Dr. Locklear will come before the state board to present that with a focus on that recommendation. The recommendation focuses on, because originally it was to hire, and then we got updates that was going to happen. So we've kept that urgency there, although on to immediately hire, because there seemed to be some, let me choose the right word, lack of progress. Let's call it that, and getting the position filled. So went back to immediately hire. So that's what SACY's asking for. And while it looks like, based on what Dr. Mullenix shared, and I'm sure you all are appreciative of that, I would still recommend still giving voice to SACY's commitment to that immediately happening. So I will pause there for consideration of that and any questions, and then we can look at other pieces as you all feel appropriate. Any questions about the recommendation? And we ended up being two, one with the focus on the position and kind of laying out some of the core things that you all felt would be important. And the second is on really, in my mind, increasing SACY's collaboration to really do legislative work. I think that this body has found that working through that legislative lens has been very beneficial. And probably maybe an area that this committee wants to focus on and really strengthen. So that's why that secondary recommendation is there.
At this time, if Stacy's comfortable with these recommendations, we can move forward with the action on this and then vote for the approval of the entire Stacy report with revisions later. So if everyone is fine with these recommendations, then moving forward, we can go ahead and move with an action. Is there any discussion? So we would need a motion and a second to move forward.
My name is Jeremiah Moore. I make a motion to accept the recommendations in the report.
I second LaRonda Lowry.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? So moved.
So what I would recommend at this point, Chairwoman Locklear, is that we devote lunch to those who hadn't had a chance to look at the report, to go through that. There's an accompanying document, again, where you will note any minor revisions that need to happen as you're going through it. If you don't mind, Dr. Locklear, I would like to just back up for just a minute, totally switch gears, apologize, switch your mind for a minute, about the arts recommendations for the standards. And encouraging you all to, and our Title VI folks who are listening to really share that with your communities. That's been a big push going back to when our previous chair was here, really getting the agency to really get the voice of the American Indian people in developing standards. So this is one way to do that. And arts in particularly, I think, is an area where we need to have a voice, because we want to make sure that American Indian art is held at the same level of esteem and taught at the same level as all other types of art. So I feel like this is we always want to give input, but this may be a prime one to give input on. So encouraging you to please share that with your stakeholders, ask them to complete it. Title VI coordinators, share that with your parent advisory committee groups, because again, once you get a seat at the table, if you don't show up to it, it will be taken back. So once we get people making special efforts to share things with us to make sure we have that, and Dr. Day has been a great ally in sending me things and saying, can you please send this to Stacy? But all we can do is share it, and then we must help and encourage our stakeholders to complete those things so that we can have enough of a voice to make an impact there. And when specific things, if Stacy notices things they want taken forward, then we can certainly invite Dr. Day here so that you have that direct input. But it has to start with first reviewing the standards. So just wanted to take a moment to encourage that as well. Thank you, Dr. Lockley, for allowing me that.
No problem, thank you.
Step back.
So at this time, we will allow for everyone to review the Stacy report, and then we'll go into lunch at noon. And you also have time to complete the survey if you feel the need to do so. Thank you. So we'll recess for lunch.